Alive. Can anything save Bitcoin from crypto winter? Can anything save altcoins? Here's a hint. Yes, AI can save Bitcoin, altcoins. Don't believe me? We'll talk about what's going on in the stock market. There's a crash in software stocks. You've probably heard about that by now, because, AI is going to write all the code in the world, etc. We've always known this, but they decided to trade it over there. That was recent. Now, of course, because they all love a dip, everyone in equities, the strategists are all saying, well, these companies may be negatively impacted by AI, but these companies are fine. So we're going to be long these companies and we'll discard these other companies because, AI is going to get them. So don't worry, there's something safe out there in stocks. And, people have made money in stocks, so they kind of eat it up. But here's the reality. That with artificial intelligence and how that's going to accelerate, nobody is safe. Nobody. The way one guy says it, a guy I used to work with, Jordy Visser, he says, nobody has a moat around their business, right? Nobody has, a bridge that they can block off and a big thing of water called a moat that makes it difficult for anybody to get into their castle or to copy or challenge their business model. Guess what? Nobody has a moat. Well, wait a minute. Almost nobody. What's the only entity on the planet that's got a moat when it comes to AI? Meaning you can't just push a button and replicate it or push a button and disrupt it. The answer simply is Bitcoin. Simply is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the only thing that AI just can't, take apart, copy, whatever, because, it's an application and it's a proof of work, decentralized network. Everyone says, well, Bitcoin is decentralized, and that doesn't really mean anything. Well, it might. It might. Now, we'll look at some charts. We'll look at stocks. We'll look at software. We'll also just take a different look at this sideways action in Bitcoin. Normally, it's not constructive. There may be another dip, but even if there is that a huge opportunity versus another leg of crypto winter, right? Because that's what everyone expects. Everyone's like, well, it's a bear market. The 4-year cycle guys were right, and it's over. Is it? Is it? Now, this might not make a live stream until Arthur Hayes came out with a new Substack, right? The tweet of the Substack called "This is Fine," with this, the little guy, the little meme with the guy drinking his coffee in a room filled with flames. Arthur Hayes is saying that artificial intelligence is going to create effectively a banking crisis where, banks cannot live with the fact that everyone walks away from credit cards, mortgages, and car loans en masse because of, the whole AI unemployment thing that everyone so, bleakly refers to. He says that brings in the Fed and the printer massively. Now, what I like about Arthur's theme is that he does give himself room by saying the reason Bitcoin went down and Nasdaq stayed up was because, liquidity in the financial system is still way too tight. Bitcoin falling with Nasdaq constant is just a sign that there isn't enough liquidity to support crypto. Now, at the moment, there would be liquidity to support crypto. Crypto could turn around and do some dramatic things on the upside and unwind this whole idea of crypto winter. So let's put it all together. AI is moving things faster than anyone thinks over in equities. Okay. Somebody says, hi, Bill, long or short? Okay. Let me finish. So if things are moving faster than anyone thinks, and that's actually being reflected in stock prices, whether it's some stocks go up or some stocks go down, it doesn't matter. Can this move over to crypto faster than anyone thinks? Do we need a 6-month winter? I would argue no. So someone's asking me long or short. You know what? This is not investment advice, but I don't have a problem, and I'm going to give you this one for free. Basically, we told Patreon that if 65K holds, then a positive or a wild scenario can unfold. Naturally, I'm not telling you what the wild scenario is, but I actually think it's worth taking a shot at getting long at either against 65 and then trying it again at 62 or 63 if it doesn't work. Just take a shot. Now, that doesn't mean 10x leveraged, but it does mean that if there was ever a surprise reversal in Bitcoin, because this like AI awakening had like multiple levels to it, let's consider another level. Right now, Ethereum has no bid. Ethereum's chart doesn't look very good. Discuss that in Patreon as well. Peter Thiel today gave up on an Ethereum treasury company. Nobody thinks any of these layer ones or any of these AI agents will ever come to crypto. It's assumed that everything is going to occur in equities. Okay? If that is not true, like for example, the Chinese released some sort of video platform and I saw people remaking the ending of Titanic. These things can be released and they can change very quickly. Goldman Sachs has also noted that things like what they call single stock volatility. In other words, if you want to buy insurance against a price decline in any single stock, it is going to cost you way more money than it has in the past, and they don't see that changing. Now, you're probably wondering, what does that have to do with crypto? Well, what it has to do with crypto is over there in equities, AI has made permanent changes. Permanent, right? In other words, no one is ever going to say, well, you know what, this doesn't matter. Or, and it's a question of time before people realize, as these thought leaders are saying, this isn't going to disrupt everything. It's going to change everything multiple times. Like people who think they're safe aren't. People who think a disruption is like, well, I have an app that makes everything move faster, so you don't have to fill out a piece of paper. That's a disruption. You could have whole new enterprises pop up. You could have new companies founded. They got founders now. You can't sit here, look at me and say that whatever started over there is going to just stop. You can't, right? And if the system is way too tight, here's another symptom that the system is way too tight. Does it give the Fed, when it comes in, more room than I would have thought a week ago? Like, look at this. I don't know if I can get this headline up here. Okay. For TikTok. Whoops. It's called the boomcession. There we go. The boomcession. Why Americans feel left behind by a growing economy. So here's the joke. Here's the joke. Manufacturing activity off the charts. Off the charts. Right? Build. But the average Joe is not seeing it. There's no employment growth. No employment growth at all. So if you lose your job, you're out of a job indefinitely trying to find something at similar pay. That's not changing. It's not. So you have a public that needs to be rescued. You might have banks that need to be rescued. Matter of fact, I would argue that the Fed has pumped so much money into the banks that the banks are actually, the stocks are pumping. The regional banks that everybody was bearish on 6 months ago just pumped to a new high. They rolled over, but the Fed is just pushing so much money in to save these banks. How long until like there's an AI wrinkle? And again, I'm not making this up. We've discussed the decline in software stocks. And I just think it's really interesting. We'll go over some charts. Just think it's really interesting that particularly with rumors and geopolitical issues, that no one is interested in Bitcoin. Because if there's ever, say, an AI shock or the threat of an AI shock and a geopolitical event at the same time, Arthur Hayes says, and I think he's right, that alone could create some kind of dip, or these events could come and go. And if there's no dip, that becomes kind of a signal. Now, Arthur Hayes says it's a financial crisis. He's going to get to buy everything super cheap. And then the Fed's going to print and it's all going to go up. Okay. I mean, that's a very plausible scenario for the fourth quarter, which is kind of how he lays it out, right? Riding along with 4-year cycle math. My question is, should you be buying every 5% dip in Zcash until further notice? Should you buy Zcash all the way down to like 250 or 205? Just basically saying, I'm going to DCA because thanks to AI, they're going to cut winter short. And Bitcoin, that everyone thinks or everybody is afraid is going to make a new low, may not. Because, I mean, they've hit this thing multiple times. Gold and silver are up today. This geopolitical thing is probably going to happen. I mean, no one really understands that. They're acting in equities like it's not. There are commentators out there, and there's news out there today saying, hey, this is going to happen. This geopolitical thing, which, we can probably talk about not at all. But that's okay. Because every negative thing that comes out, that doesn't make Bitcoin go down. Now, let's flip it. Let's go to the other side. Let's stay in bear market mode. I gave Patreon what like the ultimate bottoming level in Ethereum would be if something terrible happened. Safe to say it's a lot, it's a lot lower than it is now. Our sort of level where, we would just be like, I guess you would call it value investing. If that happens, you're probably looking, say you got wiped out in crypto. That's probably a 10% decline in stocks. And maybe the only way that happens is with a geopolitical event. From this point forward, I'm going to bet that Bitcoin can actually follow gold and silver. I'm going to bet that gold and silver going up can actually help hold Bitcoin up. And even if that's not true, I think there's going to be a bid for privacy no matter what. Because please don't tell me that privacy coins are not going to be necessary when this AI thing really, really starts taking off. Like, I don't understand why everybody says, well, it's impacting what's going on with my job. Well, it's impacting what's going on with my company. Well, software stocks just got wrecked, but don't worry. It's going to have no positive effect on crypto. I mean, we published all this stuff last year. And of course, you can't use it necessarily right now because everybody thinks it's winter, but there are coins, there are layer ones that AI agents. Are we still on the air? Hopefully we are. I don't think this is on no one's mind, and absolutely no one is talking about it. Probably because it's so insane. And I don't mind having insane conversations. I don't. Because, we'll go through some charts. Just we'll talk about insane. We'll look at it on the charts. Okay. So hopefully our friends on TikTok are seeing this. Okay, so this is Bitcoin on a 4-hour chart. Now, normally, like up here, Bitcoin doing this sideways motionless thing is pretty bearish, usually. It's usually pretty bearish. Okay. Right now, this doesn't look like anything. This is a 4-hour chart. I'm starting to wonder, okay, if it tries to make a new low and it doesn't work. That's the key. If it tries to make a new low and doesn't work, can this thing turn around and head, this is ETH, excuse me, duh. Can this thing turn around and head back towards 79? In other words, Patreon has a level where if it takes out that level, that's the trigger. But I'm just kind of wondering, it's like, hey, if this thing goes to 65 and holds, that's what this green line is. Can you bounce? Can you go to 79? Now, here's what that would do. Just playing a game. If you did something where everybody was expecting 58 and then it went to 68, 78, would that not start to put pressure on people inside the macro hedge fund world who were looking to buy Bitcoin? Noticing a very interesting statement coming out from the Goldman Sachs CEO just came out, says, you know, I own a little bit of Bitcoin and I'm watching it. I'm like, I don't remember 12 years of working there, any Goldman CEO ever kind of discussing what he was doing with his personal account. I don't recall that. I think if he's saying something like this, I think what he really is saying is that big players are looking at Bitcoin. Big players are looking. I've even seen some macro guys who were super bearish on Japanese bonds and right, super bullish on silver and right, now starting to turn their attention and going, hey, you know, maybe we should be looking at this. Because everyone, I don't know, everyone seems to be talking about it's a trap, it's winter, it's over. You know, Michael Saylor is going to get liquidated. Who exactly is talking about the connection between this AI trade that is happening in equities and is having this huge impact and your Bitcoin and, you know, your Zcash? And Arthur Hayes is even talking about hyperliquid, right? According to research, there's like 2 coins. I think there's hyperliquid and Canton that actually have tokenomics where when business picks up, they actually reward their token holders. So it's not necessarily venture capital vaporware. Now, to me, if you had 2 stable coin plays like ETH and Solana survive, then you had a nice rally in, say, Bitcoin, Zcash, Monero, and hyperliquid, is that enough to stop crypto winter? And is that enough to create a rally that would shock people? Because let me ask you something. And again, you know, we explored this in Patreon. Which is more likely? 50K or 90K? Or let's make it easier. What's more likely? 60K or 80K? What do you think people would say? Really? I think most people would say 60, that you would get some sort of retest of the lows, that, you know, equities would get smashed and everybody would come in and smash crypto. Okay, well, I guess it can happen to ETH and it can happen to altcoins. It always can. Your altcoin that's down 80% can always go down another 80%. We've all heard this. We've all heard this, right? And then, you know, there are give up trades going on across equities, across altcoins. You know, it's happening to one of our guys right now in one of his symbols. I get it. I'm looking at the chart, and I can tell you what I see. I see people giving up. I'm talking to somebody on a stream, and I'm like, after the stream, and I'm like, hey, she's like, hey, how about we talk about what coins, what coins are going to do well with AI, and maybe we'll have somebody come in and do some charts other than me. And she's like, yeah, I don't know if the guy wants to do that because it's a bear market. No one wants to talk about anything. Now, I understand people are also losing money. People in equities appear to be much better off. Things are relatively miserable over here, right? Some guy wants to buy Zcash at $50. I would say that would take a 25% decline in equities, which of course is possible, right? I mean, equities are inside of a window that, the eclipse window is Feb 17 to somewhere in early March, I believe. So yeah, scary things can also happen, but it seems interesting to me that one of the themes of the eclipse is reversal. Eclipses can magnify trends. Clearly, heading into the eclipse, Bitcoin going from 90 to 60 on a rope was last year's downtrend magnified. Okay. So are we going to have more of that? Or is it time for renewal since the eclipse was one day ago? In other words, is it sane to think that if Bitcoin does not make a new low, that it can turn around and go to 80 because it's the only thing that can survive AI intact? And of course, we all know that any machine is going to like the fixed supply and proof of work and follow gold and silver and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? I mean, Arthur Hayes did the math on the banks. Arthur Hayes did the math on boomcession, right? Where, you have an industrial boom, which by the way is good for Bitcoin. And then you have a case for massively lower rates and QE because the consumer just literally walks away from everything. They just walk away, right? Like, we may have discussed housing and what a 6% mortgage rate is doing, right? Buyers have no interest. No one can qualify for a loan. And even people in Gen Z that do have the money are spending 25% of their salary on DoorDash. They're still in like cough, cold, and flu mode where they order out and stay home. So where's the bid for housing? And Toby makes a great point. She makes a great point. Where's the ongoing bid for stocks? I mean, I know Gen Z is putting money in, trying to invest. So I know there is some flow of funds into stocks. I know that there's revulsion in crypto and people want to go over there. But are the people that need to sell, like we saw in software, like the big players that need to sell, are they bigger than any little small inflows that come in? Oh, by the way, in stocks, retail and institutions are both as long as I have ever seen them. All the statistics, like retail is piled in massively long, right? Everybody is long stocks. Okay. Breaking news from the Eagle King. Exciting news on the Clarity Act. It stalls again. The Clarity Act stalls. Okay. So we're having a little bit of trouble getting the Clarity Act through. And why is that, do you think? Why do you think? Because the banks are afraid of crypto. They're afraid of Circle's stablecoin. In other words, it's really cool to talk crypto until it comes time to actually making it legal and actually allowing stablecoins and Tether and all these things that compete with banks. Banks are afraid. They're afraid. It's that simple. And I know it's negative today. These headlines are negative today. I think if they can't get the Clarity Act done, that, it's over. Well, actually, let me say it this way. If they cannot get the Clarity Act done, the crypto bros will not vote. And the midterms become a toss-up at that point. If the left was smart, they would pass the Clarity Act, because that would tilt the crypto bros over in their direction. I do think the banks are afraid, and if you want to see, because I mean, it's done nothing but go up. We can put up a daily chart of the regional banks. So these were all the banks that were going to fail 6 months ago. So the regional bank ETF was at 47 and it's now at 73. And why is that? Well, because the Fed put a huge amount of money into the financial system, and they're still doing it. They're still doing it. Banks don't want to lend to each other. The lending market between banks is too tight. Again, why did crypto go down to begin with? Why is crypto down and Nasdaq up? Everyone has a reason. Arthur Hayes simply said, financial conditions are too tight. Banks won't lend to each other. Powell is being stubborn, and he's asking, what happens when this unwinds? Does it have to be the fourth quarter? He thinks there could be some sort of AI employment singularity, maybe in the second quarter of this year. Okay. It's cool. I mean, it's a good Substack. It's a great argument. I'm just wondering if some of these guys can be a little bit early. Like, the guy who thought that nobody would have a moat and Bitcoin would be okay. Bitcoin was the best AI investment. He was early. And I'm wondering if Arthur Hayes' scenario, maybe not that he's early, maybe that scenario can unfold a lot faster, especially if there's a geopolitical event. If you have a geopolitical event and silver blows through 125 and oil goes to 80, you all of a sudden have a second disruptor in the market along with AI. Can't wait to see how equities handle that. And of course, that does hurt crypto, but that also brings in the Fed, right? Because Powell, as stubborn as he is, he knows that once a crisis would start, they might not be able to stop it, right? In other words, if a real event happens, and you know what? If you look at, Chinese astrology, year of the horse, all of these Gann planetary alignments, I mean, it really is unbelievable. It is a huge list. Every planet is lined up with every other planet to the point where I couldn't even read it to you on the screen. Massive changes, abrupt news, kinetic conflicts, deep concern about the stock market. It goes on and on and on and on. I even see the macro guys talking about like the Chinese astrology, this being the year of the horse for the Chinese New Year, and that stocks are terrible in Chinese New Year, in the year of the horse, excuse me. There's one guy saying, the last year of the horse was 2014 and Bitcoin lost 80% of its value. There's so much Gann-related disaster P out there. It's amazing. I'm wondering if the disaster is that people forget that they can't allow a crisis, and that Bitcoin, even though it's been left by the side of the road dead, may not be dead. Because one thing that's funny is, I know the stock market's doing well today, but like Hut 8 is up. Marathon is up 2% with Bitcoin down. Iron is up 6%. These are all mining stocks. Galaxy Digital is up 3%. Okay. Coinbase's stock somehow is managing to be positive today after getting absolutely destroyed. And again, I know there's a guy that, is like, hey, what's going on? Well, what's going on with TIG and what's going on with your coin is what just went on with Coinbase. Everyone is giving up. And why is that relevant? Because normally everyone gives up right before some profound change happens. So I go through this whole 1 hour speech, and what's really the worst case scenario? Really, Well, the worst case scenario is that Bitcoin goes to like 68 or I'm sorry, 58 or 60, where there's a big DeMark point and winter continues. And, you know, we have a downside level in ETH. That's the bad scenario. What about the other scenario where people start looking in capital markets and going, where really should I be putting my money? I'm not talking about me and you. I'm talking about huge players. You know, the people who just got smoked in these software stocks, right? Remember when I told you that, you know, single stock volatility, people are afraid, and they're not going to stop being afraid. And, you know, this software, right? Whoop, see ya. AI in the right hands can change any business, any sector, anything. That's the whole power of it all, right? In other words, you know, did I know 3 years ago that I would be able to generate 25-page graduate school term papers in 10 minutes? Did I even imagine that was possible? No. I don't need the Goldman Sachs research department. I don't need that. I know what questions to ask. I can ask the questions. I can do it myself. So can you, right? I like to think we're a little bit better at it, which is why our Patreon and our YouTube member area with our podcast with Toby, you know, our content is unique because we can ask the right question and leverage these platforms. Did I think I was going to be doing that 3 years ago? Not even 2 years ago. You know, the thumbnails, the titles. I mean, these are just little practical things that make a huge difference for the little guy. Now, what happens when either the big guys can start moving stuff around or portfolio managers go, we got to get real about this. We got to start allocating money. Where can we allocate money where we're not going to get destroyed by AI? Is this not a legitimate question? There's only one answer. There's really only one answer, and that's Bitcoin, or it may be something like, you know, what I would call the majors, right? It could be Bitcoin, it could be ETH, it could be Solana, and don't laugh, it could also be XRP, because XRP is fast money. It's fast money, and they have a company behind it. I know I've said this before. I know I said this at $3, I said it at $2, and now it's at $150. And, you know, everybody is just in revulsion mode. I understand that. Okay, but money's got to go somewhere. I just noticed, you know, 2 headlines coming across from the Eagle King. Eric Trump saying Bitcoin is going to $1 million. Okay, so that's Toby's line. And, you know, even though we all love Toby, I hate it when they talk about $1 million because one sign of a bubble is no price is too high. But that's the second comment to hit the tape. Sometimes he's a little early. I think institutions are looking at it because I don't think he's brave enough to come on in the middle of a bear market and go, Bitcoin is going to hit 1 million if something wasn't up. Something's got to be up because I think Bitcoin would be a lot lower in normal circumstances. It trades terrible. There's no bid, right? The difference is every time they slam it and it looks like it's going to crack, it just kind of sort of gradually comes back. Maybe I'm wearing rose-colored glasses. I'm also seeing something coming across now. 62% says United States initiates a geopolitical event next month. In other words, they're going to lose the midterms, and now they're going to start acting like a cornered animal, right? This is what happens when you put a lot of pressure on a U.S. president with this like law enforcement issue. They just turn to war. It's as simple as that. Or they turn to foreign affairs, which can lead to these kind of conflicts. Nobody has any idea what a conflict like that, a spike in oil, would mean for stonks. No one knows. What you do know is it would bring in a massive Fed response, which again, most likely tomorrow, some economists will say, you know, if there's a geopolitical event, it brings in the Fed. I think it brings in the Fed huge. Powell cannot leave with a crisis. He can't, right? And, you know, there have been shots fired around the world, and they are holding the banking system up. I mean, that's not fake. It's happening, right? They're doing it. I know I reposted a tweet from what is his name? Finance a Lot. Here he is. Let's see if we can show it. Federal Reserve repurchase agreements, repos spiked to 30 billion today. Repo is overnight lending to the banking system when they're short of liquidity. It's usually a sign of stress. Got a little stress in the system. They know something's up overseas, or something's going on in the guts of the stock market. Now, of course, something could be going on in the guts of crypto, because we have discussed that part of what wrecked Bitcoin wasn't just tight liquidity conditions, but it could have been some sort of forcible liquidation. And we don't know that that's over. So I don't want to be a cowboy and I don't want to be an idiot, but you know what? I kind of want to be a contrarian. I kind of want to be outside the box. Welcoming somebody watching us on Twitch, Soup Heaven X. Welcome. I think somebody started off the stream by saying that I'm a pig. Okay. Stan Druckenmiller says the only way to make it in markets is to be long and be a pig. That means be long and never get off the trend. A lot of people wanted to do that in Bitcoin at 120K and how to eat humble pie. Yours truly included in that. T-Bone, DTCR. Yeah, man, let's do it. DTCR. Infrastructure, AI. Okay. Okay, well, so I've been getting into, like this 250-day regression channel. Now, I mean, this is like data center construction, I'm assuming, global data center infrastructure, and I'm sure there's no end to what that can do on the upside. It looks a little frothy at the moment. You know, they had their dip and they got their explosive short covering rally. It looks a little overdone, but you know, the overdone get more overdone when it comes to AI. I think you're so much better off owning, say, hardware than you are owning, like the Magnificent Seven, right? You could have a very serious awakening about the valuations that some of these companies trade at. It may be less about what old finance says they should be worth and more about repricing the world for AI. This is something that this is like almost kind of how I wanted to end it. What happens if they throw the finance textbook out the window? They have to change how they look at everything because there's AI event after AI event thrown in with maybe a shock or two. Like if you have a spike in gas prices with people and their credit cards and the jobs and all that stuff going on at the same time, you have anything that stunts the consumer. Okay. I think the way Arthur Hayes would say it is it brings in the Fed. If you start changing how capital markets work, okay, you can have volatility and legacy, and you can also reprice crypto. Now you can mark crypto down like a cheap suit. Boy, that's you need to watch a YouTube video to know that these days. If you can find a YouTube video about crypto, if you can find one, right? I want to think differently. Let's think differently. Okay, yeah, maybe it goes to 60. Fine. What happens if it doesn't? This is a very important question. Like we can sit here and look at Bitcoin and be like, okay, it's winter, and I get it. But winter can shift if there is either AI or a geopolitical event, because both of those can bring in the Fed. The Fed is not going to let Nasdaq go down 20% or 10%. It's not going to let what happened in Nasdaq happen to software. It's not going to let anything happen close to that, especially if there is going to be some event in overseas, which I think is crazy. So do you, I'm sure. Okay, so we have Georgie Hero is here. Welcome. We have Velez GF. How you doing? John Legend. Felix DNT Saver, a member. Baba Fomat. What's going on? RH. T-Bone. The Jeski. Welcome. Smash the like button. Stu is here, and T-Bone, you're welcome. And don't forget about wrong again, right? Hitting the button is good for the soul, as in Solana. God, can you believe Solana at 82? Somebody was saying, one day Solana will be a double-digit you-know-what coin. Well, guess what? It's a double-digit you-know-what coin. One thing I do like about Solana, from a chart point of view, is that, do you see this 12? You see this plus? That means the next big puke in Solana will be a 13 bottom, which is kind of what I'm saying, right? Particularly in altcoins, this is kind of the line we gave Patreon. It's like altcoins could go with stocks. We got levels, things, got a whole scenario set up, right? That if there's a final puke, is this an opportunity to try to catch a bid, to try to grab some, versus sitting around and waiting for winter to end? Because there are a lot of catalysts out there, and I think there's a lot of people looking at Bitcoin. That's the market update for today. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube and on Patreon.